What is up, playtested subscribers? To kick off the new year, I wanted to do a video that's kind of different, fun, whatever you want to call it. And a discussion about pre-orders came up the other day, and I was talking to some friends, and we talked about some of the dumbest things that we pre-ordered. And I unfortunately took the cake when it came to having the dumbest reasons. So I decided to make a video about 4 games that I pre-ordered for extremely dumb reasons. And I'm going to go over them in detail and see what you think.
There are some at MI6 who think I can't trust you. That you're blinded by inconsolable rage.
You might be able to guess by this entry that I'm a huge Bond fan. And right around the time when Quantum of Solace was hitting theaters was when I really was into Bond movies. There was actually a time when the new James Bond game was a big deal. Ever since GoldenEye on the N64, James Bond had sort of had a foothold in the market of being a de facto shooter. But those days were long gone, and I knew Quantum of Solace as a game was probably going to be average at best, but there was one thing that sold me the minute I saw it. The Collector's Edition case. I didn't care about the game at this point, I had to have this case. Fortunately, due to a robbery, I no longer have the case, so I hopped on eBay just to see if people were selling it, and they are. And they were cheap enough to the point that I considered buying one again, but not that cheap. We'll see what happens. But I grabbed some pictures so you can see what it looks like. It's an all-black steelbook with kind of gold highlights and lettering, but there was something about this one in particular that was just so simple and elegant. And I really wanted it just to display in my collection, so for that reason, I bought it. And yeah, it was really cool, and I honestly miss having it because it's something that I'd like to just have and display now. But I don't really know what our fascination with steelbooks are in general. But this one in particular sold me on the higher dollar version of the game. It was stupid, but I don't really regret doing it, and I'm even considering buying one on eBay. I probably won't, but you never know what the future can hold. And for what it's worth, the Quantum of Solace game was actually okay. I mean, it wasn't amazing by any standard, but I definitely expected something much worse. So all in all, it was an okay purchase, but spending more money for a simple case probably wasn't the smartest thing I've ever done.
When you look into a Mantell soldier's eyes, all you see is the glory of battle. They are injected with nectar,
administering,
boosting their fighting abilities to the ultimate.
There was a time in gaming when everything that was a console FPS was labeled as the quote, Halo killer. Killzone, Area 51, Crysis, all games that were supposed to be the quote, Halo killer, but weren't able to match its success. But then a game from Free Radical somehow started getting buzz as the true Halo killer. Going into exactly why this game was labeled that is probably an idea for a whole different video, but for whatever reason, word about Haze started spreading that it's the PS3's answer to Halo. At the time I was working at Circuit City, and being in the middle of a group of friends and coworkers that were mostly on one side or other of the console wars, Haze became a game we had to have. So for that reason alone, I pre-ordered it. I was looking forward to watching the people buy the next big shooter. Except that didn't happen. I specifically remember we had 42 copies and sold 3, all to employees. Haze wasn't even close to being a Halo killer, but it also wasn't even close to being a decent game. Pretty terrible, in fact. And to be honest, I don't think we played it for more than 1 or 2 nights, which looking back was probably one of the dumbest decisions we've ever made. And we actually let the hype and media cycle get us on calling something a quote Halo killer. What's funny is that Call of Duty 4 was actually out at this time, and I think you could argue that was the true Halo killer, but for whatever reason we were still looking for that PS3 only Halo answer. But instead we ended up going back to games we had already played. So I guess this is a lesson for don't let the media sell you on something, because they usually are just trying to sell you something.
Supposed to be a simple mission. In and out in 3 days. But then things went wrong.
During the time of the PS3 and Xbox 360 era, there was, for whatever reason, an obsession, not just by me, but for many people, of the Unreal Engine 3. I don't know what it was about this engine, but everything that played on it or was built on it had a unique look and style to it, and we all loved it. In fact, there was an XBLA game called RoboBlitz that was made on Unreal Engine 3 specifically because fans asked for it. They just loved the look of it. I'm sure it has something to do with Gears of War because somehow Microsoft had pushed that engine just as much as that game early on, and it worked on a lot of us. So when a remake of the, I don't want to call it classic, but at least in my opinion, the classic Turok was coming, built on the Unreal 3 engine, yeah, I was pretty excited. But where I really screwed up was that I kept looking at the game in stills. And Unreal Engine 3, like a lot of engines today, looks so much different in motion than they do in stills. And this being the era of video game magazines being everywhere, I kept seeing images of Turok, and I had to play it solely based on this image of this raptor and T-Rex because in stills it looked freaking amazing. So I pre-ordered it. And I remember walking into GameStop that first morning and expecting to see people everywhere because this was the rebirth of Turok and it was on Unreal, and I was the only person that had pre-ordered it. I got the game home, played it, and it's pretty average at best. I think some people would even call it pretty bad. But what really broke my heart was that the game didn't exactly run the best and it wasn't running at the highest resolution, so those amazing stills that I was looking at were kind of blurry and not nearly as cool looking in motion. I'm pretty sure I never finished it, and I don't think I got very far into it before I just sort of put it down and walked away. I still have it somewhere, and why I don't really know, because that should have been something I traded in right away to get some of my money back, but I kept it, probably to remind myself to not buy a game and pre-order a game simply based on an engine and some still shots. Because as we know now, and even though we knew back then, a trailer and some screens are not indicative of what the final game will turn out to be. I like to say that was the final time that Unreal Engine 3 sold me on a game, but unfortunately, it's not quite true. TNA Impact on the Xbox 360. Now, I debated putting this one in simply because, like with the 007 issue, I no longer have the item. But I can't even find photos of the item. I'm going to do my best to describe it, and I apologize, but the reason I want to sort of put this out there is because I know somebody has a photo or has this item still, and I would love to see if they can find it and send me a picture of it because it's absolutely ridiculous. So there were two things about TNA Impact that sold me on it. One being that WWE had a foothold on this market and there wasn't a different wrestling game, and all those games kind of looked the same since the PS2 era, whereas TNA Impact was going to be built on Unreal Engine 3, so it was a drastically different looking game, and I really wanted to see a lot of these stars and how this game would play in Unreal. And it actually, to this day, looks pretty neat. So this was an opposite situation of Turok, where the final game actually probably benefited from Unreal Engine. But what sold me on this game and why I pre-ordered it was the pre-order bonus, which was a thumb wrestling ring. Now, I have some images of what a thumb wrestling ring is, but specifically, Game Crazy paid to have the TNA Impact thumb wrestling ring exclusive if you pre-ordered from them. So here's an image of what a thumb wrestling ring is, but now you have to basically picture it being a six-sided ring because that was TNA's thing back in the day, and instead of it actually having, quote, ropes, it was just hair ties around it. It was absolutely ridiculous, but it was completely free with a pre-order. It's one of those items that not a lot of people even know about or remember, but I know somebody out there still has it. I might even have it somewhere, but I have looked everywhere and I cannot find it. But yes, a dumb thumb wrestling ring that I never even used is what sold me on this game. And while I think it's kind of ridiculous, it also shows that at some point, There was a different time when it came to pre-ordering, and it wasn't just in-game digital items that you got. Sometimes you actually got something tangible and pretty unique. This comes to mind, but as well as when you pre-ordered the Wind Waker on GameCube and got the Ocarina of Time and Master Quest for free. Pre-orders are in a different place now, and this is just one of those weird relics that I'm hoping we can maybe surface again, because I would love for people to understand how stupid and ridiculous this was. But also to understand that, yeah, as kids, we weren't the smartest, and even sometimes as adults, we're swindled by these dumb pre-order bonuses. But that's going to do it for this episode. Please, if you have an image of this TNA wrestling ring, or if you even have it, I would love to have a picture of it again, just so I can put it up and show people just how absolutely nuts it was. Also, let me know in the comments if you pre-ordered something that you either regret or did for a really dumb reason. We've all done it, so don't feel ashamed. Hit that like and subscribe button, it really helps us out, and we'll see you next time.